special meeting. If I can have a roll call, please.
Mr. Riddle, Mr. McBride, Ms. Hannah,
Yes.
Ms. Callahan-Wozniak. Here. Ms. Leguizamo,
Present.
Ms. Gonzalez, Mr. Ewing.
Here, we do have a quorum. I know Mr. McBride is on the premises, but we have 4. Given that there's really only one agenda item, and we have a budget workshop after, I'm going to continue with the agenda. So we have like a motion to go into open session, and then for the record, Ms. McBride is here at 6:03.
This Lucy, so moved.
Motion by Ms. Leguizamo,
Sorry.
second by, I believe that was Ms. Wozniak.
Yeah.
All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. All right, we're now in open session. Pledge of Allegiance. I'll ask Mr. Christensen if you'd be so kind. Thank you. All right. Now we are at our opportunity for public comment. Are there any names on the list? There are none. So we're going to move on to our old business, which is policy 8001, 2021, COVID health and safety, second reading. Do you have a motion?
I motion that we approve the second reading as presented.
Motion by Ms. Wozniak,
Second.
second by Ms. Leguizamo. Any comments, questions on the motion?
Just want to clarify that once this is approved, it would become effective tomorrow. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's it. Thank you.
Roll call vote, please.
Ms. Hannah,
Yes.
Ms. Callahan-Wozniak,
Yes.
Ms. Leguizamo,
Yes.
Mr. Ewing,
Yes.
Mr. McBride.
Yes.
All right. Motion carries. Item is approved. I'd like for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion
Second.
by Ms. Leguizamo, second by Ms. Wozniak. Any comments or questions on the motion? All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. We are now adjourned, and if we can get our next meeting up. Okay, we have our budget committee meeting, so I'd like to call to order the third budget committee budget workshop, August 3rd, 2021, Waukegan Public School Board of Education. If I can have a roll call.
Mr. McBride,
Here.
Mr. Ewing,
Here.
Ms. Callahan-Wozniak,
Here.
Ms. Leguizamo,
Present.
Ms. Hannah,
Yes.
Mr. Riddle, Ms. Gonzalez.
All right, so we do have a quorum. Item 3, and then 3.1 is how we have it listed on the agenda, but it is the previous budget workshop minutes from June 9th, 2021.
I make a motion that we accept the minutes as presented.
Motion by Ms. Hannah,
Second.
second by Ms. Leguizamo. Any comments or questions? All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. All right, minutes are approved. And now we have our reports and presentations.
Good evening, members of the board. Good evening, members of the board, superintendent, staff, and community members. Tonight we're going to have our budget workshop number 3. Ms. Polk and her team are actually coming up to the room right now to provide you this information. We did attach this presentation that's on the screen for you this evening to board docs for your pre-review. before presenting this evening, and there's some critical information in there in regards to ESSER 3 as well. So if you all could bear with us just one moment, she'll be up in just a moment.
Okay.
Thank you.
In the meantime, you want to recite us a little poetry, Mr. LeBaron?
Yeah, so Mr. Riddle had pre-planned,
I was making sure otherwise we start picking them and asking.
no, and then Miss Gonzalez is stuck in traffic. So
Oh, she has to go to Chicago?
she did just for today. No, there's always traffic.
Oh,
Ready when you are.
Ready?
Ms. Funky.
Get my wind back. Thank you very much for indulging us. We were actually going over the presentation for you all tonight. Board President, board members, superintendent, community members, and colleagues. It's our pleasure to present to you tonight Budget Workshop 3, which is the final of the budget presentations before budget adoption. Next slide, please. In alignment with Destination 2022, the Superintendent's Initiatives are and has been for the last several years student achievement, community engagement, organizational effectiveness, institutional access, and supportive climate. When the budget presentations have gone forth through the vetting process from the schools and departments, these initiatives were in mind, and the requests were aligned with Destination 2022. Next slide, please. One of the major things and that I'm very proud of, and I think that all of us are proud of, is the fact that we're budgeting strategically. One of the key aspects of the process in which we've presented to you over the last few years is that it's equity-based as opposed to being equal. We're listening to the voices of those that are closest to the students, the principals, and the leaders, the administration within the district, and that's how the budget is developed. And so in this picture that you see here, at the bottom, you'll notice that not everyone is riding the same size bicycle or sickle, and but they're all getting to the same place, right? So everybody has different needs, and they have different requirements, but yet they're all getting what they need to get where they need to go. And that's exactly what we're doing with the district strategic planning process. Next slide. In the Superintendent's Destination 2022, driven by design, the district strategic plan has an emphasis of positively affecting student achievement. Again, this was a major driving force and developing the budget that we've presented to you on 2 separate occasions before today. And also, it's important that I point out that prior to the budget being presented to the Board of Education and the community, this budget was vetted by the principals, by the deputies, by the Budget Development Committee, was then presented to the superintendent, and then ultimately presented to the board and the community. So it went through several vetting processes before it's got here today. Next slide, please. We did the Budget Development Committee on April the 23rd. Board members were included on that committee, as well as community members and parents, and also district administration. We had a moderator, which was Mr. Marvin Brimbury, who facilitated the discussions. Next slide, please. Inherent in the fact that we're presenting this budget today at a Budget Development Committee is our goal to be transparent. We want the Board of Education as well as the community to be aware of the process that we're using to develop the budget that we're presenting tonight, and everything that the district intends to do is included, at least at this present time, is included in the presentation. As I've already stated, equity is a key factor, and also sustainability. The Office of Business and Financial Services don't necessarily look at just 1 year. We look at 3 years out. Can we sustain the level of spending that we're doing? And then we make those type recommendations to the superintendent. And if you look at our financial records, we're doing quite well. So sustainability has been in the forefront of the development of the budget, as well as looking at return on investment. We've heard from the principals where we're doing progress monitoring. The reason for the progress monitoring, if we're getting greater return on investment, then maybe we can expand or broaden the initiatives that we're doing in one school and multiple schools so that we can impact more students in a positive way. And so we're working collaboratively with ASAP division, Dr. Nolt, and coming up, and the area superintendents with the progress monitoring so that we can see what's working in the schools. Next slide, please. This is the budget calendar that we've presented to you on several occasions. What I wanted to point out tonight is that we've sent the notice already to the board, which is a requirement that before we have a hearing on the budget, it has to be posted in the newspaper. And so we've asked that the notice be posted from the 7th through the 9th. For 30 days, the budget has to be on public review. We're looking at that from August 6th to September 14th, and then that date is in error. The adoption and the hearing should be September the 14th.
Okay.
Yes. Any questions on that so far? Next slide, please. Tax extension. We kept this slide in here because we wanted to, again, reiterate that it was the superintendent's and the board's desire that we keep our taxes level. And so you'll note here that we did not increase the taxes, that we extended to local residents. We believe that each year we have some tax objections, so we don't believe that we're going to get 100% of the taxes that we extend. So in our budget projections, we use 98.86% collection rate, just so we're not over projecting what we're going to get from our tax extensions. Next slide, please.
I have a question on that slide.
Yes, ma'am.
Could you go back on that slide, please? Yeah. Okay. Can you explain the student enrollment is projected to be 15,000, and why are we at 15,000 when the district documents says another number, closer to 14,000, something like that?
If I could ask Mr. Christensen to answer that question. It was presented at Budget Workshop 1, and so it's a projection.
Mm-hmm.
So the document at Budget Workshop 1 has a total of 15,000 with pre-K. So you may be referring to the, without pre-K, we got 14,300. With pre-K, it says 15,000.
So we do include preschool in the projections?
Yes, I mean, I provide several different versions of the number. So we've got with pre-K and without pre-K, because obviously we do not get state aid for pre-K. That's part of the grant,
Right.
unless they're the diverse learners. So the diverse
Right.
learners pre-K we do, but not those. So that's why there's the two numbers. So it's 14,300 without pre-K, 15,000 with pre-K.
And the projected 15,000 is valid with in devising the budget.
Yes, because we wanted to include all of that data when we presented it, because all of this is an estimate. We don't know what the actual numbers are going to be until we're into the year and we get the first, third, and sixth day enrollment. So these are projections, and they're our best guess on
Okay.
what we believe is going to happen.
Right. And the 6-day total will then be put in.
We will revise our presentations to the Board of
Okay.
Education.
Okay, thank you.
Next slide, please, yes. As you know, we get our receipts based upon two extensions. And how we project our revenue receipts is like 49% from one year, and then that current tax year, about 51%. And so we believe that across all of the funds that we actually extended funds, that we're going to get $57.7 million. Most of the money that we're projecting we're going to get, obviously, is in the education fund because we get ed and special ed. That's in that ed fund. O&M about $6.4 million. Debt service $6.6 million. And you'll note that that fund went down significantly, because in the past it would be like $9 million we would get in there. But now, because we've paid off some of our debt, it's down to $6.6 million. Transportation 3.3, IMRF 8.6, and then the TART fund 2.8. Again, you see here, we believe our collection rate is going to be about the 98.86%.
Are
Next.
they still using that, I'm gonna just say, for lack of a better term, that COVID relief in terms of tax collection at the county?
This year, that was not presented, so our assumption is it's not happening. That's a good question, because
Okay.
we had a delay of about 2 to 3 months on our
Right.
receipts of taxes, but that was not an option that was presented this year.
Okay, good.
Next slide, please, yes. One of the questions that we've gotten from the board over many years is, where is the majority of our revenue coming from? So that's why we included this slide here. You'll note that there's a significantly more money that's coming in federal, and we all know that's because ESSER money is included in here. We've never really had $74.8 or $74.9 million in federal money that we've gotten. Typically, that would be between $10 to $15 million, but it's more because we're projecting all of our ESSER 3 and the remaining portions of our ESSER 2, which is 50.5, and then about $11 million in ESSER 2. So that's why that number is higher than it normally would be. The larger portion of the state, which is the 130.3, we know that our evidence-based funding comes in there. So that's why we have a lot of money in the education fund. We get upwards of $130 $30 million in evidence-based, but the reason why you don't see the total here is because we have to move some of our evidence-based into other funds. So the bulk of it is going into the education fund, so we're projecting 53% of our education revenue is going to be state, and then of course from the taxes, we're projecting 38 million, which is about 16% of the funds in the education fund.
So the orange represents,
State.
The blue is local.
And the gray is federal, and the blue is local.
yeah, the scale is just not there. Oh, yes.
It's right under
I'm
the line,
seeing
yeah.
it.
It's small.
Oh, too
Okay.
small. I don't have my glasses on.
Major sources, we wanted to give you like what the major sources are, so we put that to the right. Next slide, yes. Operating funds. We know that where the bulk of our expenditures are coming from is the education fund, O&M, transportation, and working cash. Those are major parts that measure the health of our district. You'll note here that we're projecting, and again, it's an estimate because we don't have audited numbers currently. We're working on closing the books for last year. So we're projecting that in the education fund, we're going to have about $40 million at the beginning of this fiscal year. 10.6 in O&M, 4.7 in transportation, and 27.3 in working cash. As you know, there aren't any expenditures that come out of working cash. Working cash is used as an internal banking system for us where we can loan money to each fund when we're low. We're going to come to the board with a resolution so that we can have the authority to be able to loan the money, and we do that every year so that you all let us be able to do that. Revenue, you'll note that on that second row across all of the funds here, as well as the expenditures. What I want to highlight here, you probably see those negative numbers where it's the revenue over or under expenditures. Each year, we point that out to you so that you don't become alarmed by that. We already know that we're going to spend more than we get in, and that's because, salaries is the major part of that. But we ensure in our office that we have enough beginning balance to cover the shortfall there. And I can assure you that we don't have to do a deficit reduction plan, because if we get too low, we're required to do one. And at present, we do not have to do a deficit reduction plan, although we have in the current year revenue compared to expenditures is negative. But if you look at that bottom row, you'll note that we're projecting that, and again, this is assuming that we spend 100% of what we've requested. Typically, I've presented to the board at various times 2 different presentations. One, I would have what was requested and what I really believe that is happening based upon trends, okay? So here, assuming that we spend everything, we're projecting in the education fund $21.7 million, and then ending in O&M 10.4, transportation 4.3, and again still 27.5 as a fund balance in the working cash fund. This would equate to about a 23% reduction overall in the operating fund balance. Do I believe that this is what it's going to be at the end? I do not, but I cannot definitively tell the board that it is not going to be this way, because these are the requests that were submitted to our office. Next slide, please. The other funds, debt service, IMRF, Social Security, capital projects, TART fund, life safety. These funds really are considered funds for our district because we have debt. We don't levy for the debt, but it's the approved debt that is at the county. And then IMRF, capital projects, TART fund, and life safety. Life safety fund, we have to get the projects, as you've heard from Mr. Moulton in operations, we have to get those approved before we could put expenditures in that. I think the board have heard on multiple occasions, Mr. Moulton or someone from operations come. Matter of fact, at the last board meeting, I think it was North School, that was potentially an emergency. And so those type expenses would go in the life safety fund. If you look at the bottom, we would read this the same way. If you look at that bottom row, we're projecting and debt service will have about $150,000, 2.2 in IMORF, negative, and capital projects. You say, okay, it's negative, but we've had a historical deficit in the capital projects fund of $4.8 million. So really, some of our money that's in there is masking that other $2 million. So really, this fund has historically had a $4.8 million deficit from eons ago, before any of us probably was in the district, okay? And then TART fund, 402 negative, and we typically request at some point to transfer some of our evidence-based funding there in order to make that zero. Life safety, 2.8. One of the things I also want to point out here is for life safety, it's been our goal to keep a significant balance in there because we never know when an emergency is going to happen. And so you'll notice that we've kind of kept $2 million in that fund year after year so that we can address any capital improvements that come up that's an emergency. That was intentional. Over, I guess, the last 15 years that I've been in the district, we've been trying to do that. Next slide. All funds, we kind of want to put it side by side, so you'll see other funds. Overall, we're projecting the fund balance is going to be 1.9, and our operating funds we're projecting is going to be the $64 million, and then overall, we're projecting we're going to end with $66 million. I could tell you over the years we were happy if we ended with 40 million, with 30 million, but now we're ending with 66, so we're ecstatic. Okay. Next slide. Again, the board was interested in seeing how much we're spending by object. If you look at the far left column, you'll see salary, benefits, purchase services, supplies, capital, other objects, non-cap. So you'll see how much in each of those funds, education and across the top row, how much we're spending in those areas. For instance, salaries in the education fund, $138.6 million. And you'll see all the way down that most of the budget that we're spending is in salary and benefits. That's not unique to Waukegan. That's general across all organizations, including school districts and other organizations, that salary and benefits take up a large portion of the budget. And then, of course, transportation, which deals with our students. Okay? Next slide, please. A board member several years ago wanted to know how much were we dedicating towards instruction, and so we chose to include that. You'll note that the majority of the money, again, is going towards instruction, not support services, but instruction. And then community services, which is also like paying for the students to go to outside schools and stuff like that. Next slide, please. With the help of the entire organization, we're pleased that we were able to meet the statutory deadline of posting the safe return and continuity plan for our district. The allocation was released on July 1st, and we were able to post our district's continuity plan and safe return on July the 29th, which is within the 30-day window. We've noted here what the requirements were, how much our district is to receive, which is a total of $50.5 million in ESSER 3. And then you can find this plan if you were to go on the district's main page. Mr. Alajakis put it there for us. Thank you very much for doing that. And also, if you were to go to operations and then to business and financial services, to the far left, you'll see ESSER 3 page, and you can access it there as well. We have the website noted at the bottom of this presentation if you wanted to go look at it. The next slide, we wanted to show that we had different buckets of money. 2 buckets. One was from dedicated to the local agency, which is our school district, but then we also had money that was reserved at the state agency level. For the local, it was divided into 2 portions, and we presented that before. It was $43 million that we were getting that was allocated locally. 20% had to be spent on learning loss. And then the other 80% of that $43 million could be spent on whatever in mitigation for COVID, okay? So here we show that in the application that was submitted, $8.7 million, or 8,675, was dedicated to learning loss. And of that other, which was the $34.7 million, capital improvement was only $8.8 million, and then academics was that $25 million. The details of this is in the subsequent slides. The state agency money, it was reserved for specific purposes. After school, we had to reserve that for $1 million for after school. 5.1 had to be for learning loss, and another $1 million for summer enrichment. It was reserved for those specific purposes at those specific amounts. And so that makes up the $50.5 million. To the far right in the third column, we kind of put the percentages as it relates to that $50.5 million. And you'll note overall academics, we spent 82% of that 50.5 on overall academic allocations. What do we mean overall? We mean learning loss, after school, summer enrichment. All right, and then capital improvement was only the 8.9 or 8.852% million. Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
so the overall academic allocation, $41,733,486. That is overall academic allocation. And have we determined where that money is going to be spent? And their documents do exist showing the allocation and amount and where. Okay, and I'm looking at the state agency, education agency after school. I'm going to presume that those are after school programs, and isn't that kind of low for after school programs in the district of 15,000 students? Okay, I guess maybe I'm asking where would like agencies like BAM and Asian Human Services fall into these allocations? okay, because what I'm seeing here is that the after-school is lower than the contracted amount for BAM and WOW. And so where are they in this allocation of money?
Okay. So we anticipated that question. So in the subsequent slides, we have the details on exactly what we're spending. So for instance, if you go to the next slide, LEA Learning Laws, if you were to look at all of those slides that has the title LEA Learning Laws, the details are here with the amounts that we put in the application that we believe are allowable for these particular instances. And that application has been submitted to the state, and we anticipate that it's going to be approved. And likewise, for LEA Other, the details are provided there. I could have staff look at where we put BAM and WOW,
It was on.
but if I had to guess, it was in Other.
Yeah, I see.
Yes.
Yeah, I see it up here. 1,623,000. Whew, that's a lot of money. Yeah.
Yes. So again, for LEA Other, we're able to do any of the three areas. We have the flexibility of doing that. And so the majority of what is in this application were initiatives that were submitted by the schools. You'll notice that many of the schools' names are there, and it went through the SBB process. Any additional questions on that? So I'll give you a moment to just peruse through the LEA Learning Laws. We provided that information. We provided the details for the other. Let me see where we have the capital projects. I don't have these pages numbered, so it's very difficult for me to tell you there. But if you were to look, let's see.
I do have a question, though.
The sixth page for LEA Other, you'll see that it has McCall windows, McCall roofs, McCall abatement, Oakdale roofing replacement, windows, that sort of stuff. So that all of the capital, that $8 million that we put in there, is in the schools.
I do have a question, Mrs. Pope.
I don't know why we couldn't get
My question, I kind of missed the slide as opposed to how much money we were spending for outsourcing, sending kids to other schools rather than our district. What was the capital amount on that?
Without me going back there, do you have that number, Brian? For a private facility, can we come back to you with that information?
Yeah, that's
Provided.
to me, yes, that's important to me
Yeah.
to know how much money we're spending for outsourcing.
Yeah.
And I know that our special need kids is a little different, and I don't know how to separate the two, but those that are going to private schools with being picked up with cabs and that kind of stuff. I just want to see what the outcome, the total amount is on that.
Okay, certainly. We'll provide that information to the superintendent and ultimately to the board. Any additional questions on learning loss?
And so we did not put any more of the ESSER funds into, because when we thought we were just getting the 43 million, that's when the 8.6 million, I guess, was what was allocated from out of the 43 million. But when we found out that the actual that we were getting was 50.5. I thought that we were going to add the balance to make it 15 million.
Yes, and I wanted to put a slide in here to address that, and I did. If you would keep going. Next slide, keep going. Right there. We put a slide in there where we previously had came to the board because of the concern of the board president and you as well, and possibly other board members. We said we would draft a resolution for $10 million to reserve it to go towards learning loss. But because we're putting $40 million into learning loss, we're asking the board to not have to do that resolution because much of that $50 million is going towards learning loss. The HVAC projects that were a part of the budget request is in ESSER 2. So we didn't have additional capital projects, and we had learning loss expenses that were identified by the principals and also our deputies, and they're in this application. I think we conformed with what the board's recommendation was, more on academics.
So because we're not going to do a resolution, it really doesn't mean anything.
I really don't understand.
We're drafting the reserve for 10 million of the fund balance to address learning loss, and you say it is further recommended that monies be reserved for 3 years ending September 2024, which means that we have $10 million that we're going to be spending over 3 years, right?
I think the board president wanted to comment, but that's not what that was our initial recommendation, because you wanted us to spend an additional $10 million on learning loss.
Right.
But because rather than $8 million we're spending on learning loss and the remainder of that $40 million going to capital, we put much more, 80% of the 50 into learning loss. So it would have only been $18 million we were spending on learning loss, whereas now we're spending $40 million on learning loss.
Right, and we have documents to
Yes,
show that.
all of the expenditures that we presented to you, the details, they're before you. And it outlines exactly what we intend to do with the money.
And that was, can you go back, please, to the slide, just so we can see the breakdown?
Page 17.
So 82%, $41 million will be spent on academic loss compared to the 18 million, and 8.8 million will be spent on capital improvements. So the recommendation is that we don't need to reserve 10 million because we're spending well in excess of that amount.
That is correct.
To address learning loss. Just want to make sure that the board was clear on that.
And we will be monitoring that spending.
Every 6 months by statute, we have to go back and review the plan.
Thank you. You can go back and proceed. I don't know if, oh yeah, that slide you were talking about, right, Ms. Polk?
Okay. If there's no additional questions there, next slide. And again, it's been across the district, from the superintendent down through the deputies to our office, to remain solvent, compliant, be transparent, inclusive, equity-based, and needs-based. This whole strategic process focuses on those areas. Next slide, please. Miss Lucy, this is yours, and Miss Wozniak. as well as the rest of the board, but primarily those two. We went back and we looked at the numbers at your request because some schools appear to be skewed. And so what we found in pulling the data is that some schools have staff members that have salaries that's higher than others, and then their enrollment might be low. So that would make their per pupil expenditures a little higher than what we would think. So that's what's caused by those schools that you had highlighted before. We did go back and look at it. And so this is what it looks like. But you'll see, and I think that I attribute much of this to site-based SVB, that you'll see that most of the schools are reaching the average for the district, which is a good thing. Kind of leave that for you to see that. And then the details of the expenditures per school is on the subsequent slides. Next slide, please. You'll see the site level expenditures per pupil. That's those that we could clearly say were expended at the school. And then some expenditures were expended at the district level, and we couldn't really say it was directly for that school. So we were permitted to do a pro rata method for those expenditures, and you'll see that on the district centralized level per pupil. And so that's why the numbers are the same, right? Because we did it on a pro rata basis. And then the next slide, there were certain expenditures like capital and other things that we cannot include in this calculation. And so when we remove those allowable or expenditures that have to be excluded, that came out to the 23.9 million. You'll see in the last column to the right, 23.9 million of exclusions. And so our total expenditures, according to our ledger, because I have to tell you that our books have not been audited, so these are unaudited numbers. We're projecting that our expenditures at the end of 21 will be, for the funds, for all funds, is going to be $247 million. And so the per pupil expenditures, if you were to look at that column, second from the right, you'll see those numbers there, and it really depicts the picture where we had the bar graph. It's saying the same thing, it's just in the number format here.
Can I ask a quick question on that?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you just briefly explain the location code for Waukegan High School as to why that one has 4, just to kind of clarify for that?
Yes. When we set up that account, it's one school at ISB, so it's AOEC, the 9th grade center, Waukegan, and Washington. So we pulled those numbers from these location codes in our ledger and combined them so that we get one total for the high school.
There's still a reference of the 9th grade center, huh?
There's a budget out there. So we pull it, anything that's attributed to the high school, we pull it and put it here.
Thank you.
Yep. So we're subject to, my entire team is here. We're subject to any questions that the board has regarding this budget.
So it wasn't here presented today, and we had the question last time was regards to the full-time employees and the denial rate. I don't know, Superintendent, if you have somebody here today to kind of discuss the outcome of going back, revisiting the denials of the full-time employees. Where are we at nowadays with the new budget?
I can speak to that. So I had a meeting with our principals. Due to us not knowing exactly what we will be facing due to the pandemic, we have committed to our principals that we will be looking at this second semester in January. If earlier, we will revise it earlier. But as of right now, we feel that we are in a sufficient place to open up the school year with the unknowns that we are facing before us. So we will consistently be looking at our budgets and be back, reporting back to the board.
And just to clarify, Superintendent, that also includes those positions that was approved during COVID, but did not get filled, because those were those positions where we approved it based off of if we were to come back in person. And so those were approved. However, we didn't come back in person until like 2 months of the school year, so they didn't fulfill those positions, but they did have to reapply. And I believe even those positions were also not approved. So I'm just kind of also wanting to understand that situation.
I would like to come back to the board on that, because I don't believe not all of them were not approved. There were specific ones based off whether enrollment declined, etc. So we could go back and look at that and give you exact list of what that is, but I don't believe it was all of them, off the top of my head. And I'm seeing Gwen shake her head
Yes.
too, and I think I'm
Not all of them
pretty
were
correct.
disapproved.
And the,
Thank you. Yep, go ahead, Ms. Sam.
and the denials that Ms. Leguizamo is referencing, that also includes the principals asking for other resources for their schools, and they were denied.
So there were denials, and when you go through the SVB budget, what the principals are told is to ask for the world. But however, there needs to be a strategy. And so what is the strategy? Do the resources align to your strategy? Is there actual KPIs, key performance indicators, that benchmark those strategies? So all that is looked at in making a determination. Just because hypothetically, myself, I asked for a budget, everything is not approved unless it's tied to a strategy with some key performance indicators that we can assess for accountability. And in speaking with our principals at that time, I made that very clear that we were going to work with our strategies, our SIP plans, and revisit them as we progress through the year. So I hope I answered your question, but.
Okay.
And I'm just piggybacking, Ms. Hannah, on the committee when we went through and there was the denied list. Some of those were, and that's what Ms. Leguizamo was just
Talking
asking,
about.
is that, hey, there were a lot of denials, and we instructed superintendent, our team, to go back and talk about those denials. And that was the response that the superintendent just gave. So the
Well,
board is aware of what those positions were. And I know for me personally, one of the things I wanted to see, and that I hope is in the budget, is as we talk about mental health, as I saw, and I appreciate listening to the Board of Education and reallocating based on Ms. Hannah's recommendation, the amount and how we were splitting up those ESSA3 funds. But I do want to go back to what are we doing with our internal talent as it relates to mental health, and particularly our counselors, our social workers, and if we, those were the two. College and career, I think we approved the budget, and that budget was included in here. But I wanted to know specifically those, because I know we've talked about the importance of mental health. We're bringing in external stakeholders. But the other thing that I want to keep reiterating is as we bring in external partners, we're also building internal capacity. And so I do want to continue to advocate and would like to see those numbers if any of those previously denied positions are approved now, because we do have BAM. We haven't voted on it yet, but I anticipate that we will be moving forward with BAM, that we will be moving forward with WOW, that we already approved Age and Human Services, and we need to coordinate those efforts alongside our internal talent, like our social workers. And part of the justification for bringing in BAM and WOW that we heard is that the social workers are overtaxed. So if our social workers are overtaxed, if our counselors are overtaxed, and we're finishing with the $60 million, fund balance, that we should be putting some of those resources. All of them can't go to people. I understand that. But in the areas that the board has said is a priority, which is mental health, that we show the community that we kind of mean what we say when we talk about it. So I will advocate for that in the budget.
Right, and I wanna
Yes, can I just
clarify.
suggest that, please, real quick? So at the next board meeting, which you're going to see when we come back with BAM and WOW, is an actual presentation on social workers and counselors and the systems of supports that will be there. I believe that we need to revisit that so the board can actually see what's there. And I believe that there is, I don't want to say a fallacy that we're not adding more social workers. We are adding more social workers, and so we will come back to the board and show that we do want to build internal capacity. But I do want to remind the board there is a strategy. So we need to stick with the strategy to ensure that the levers that we are moving within the district are actually progressing in the way that we see that they will with the strategy that we're implementing. Just to throw something at, like I always say, throw rice at the wall does not mean it's going to stick. So I, by no means am I saying that there's not a need for social workers or counselors. I would like the board to see the strategy and actually see what is being applied, because I don't think that we've done a great job in showing you that. So we will revisit that on Tuesday. Before even BAM or WOW is even voted on or anything, just so the board can have an understanding and comprehension of what that support will look like in our district, for more knowledge of your vote and also more knowledge of how we are applying more efforts into the supports around social workers.
Okay, thank you for that. But to go back to the question I initially asked you about the principals being adding things to their set plans. That's what I am asking about, and the denials of what the principals asked for. And I don't see any reason why, with the money that we just saw here, I don't see why any of the principals could be denied what they asked for, because if I am understanding the school improvement plans were done, if you will, by the principals before we knew that we were going to get ESSER funds. And once we received the ESSER funds, then I thought that the principals went back and added additional things to their school improvement plans, but those things were denied. That's what I'm saying.
Yes. Almost 100% of non-salary benefit requests were funded. We kind of showed here the difference in what we typically would spend from year to year would be about $240 million. Here we're up to 300. That's solely because we got this extra money. One of the things I want to point out is, even though we're ending with a fund balance of $66 million, if we spend $1 more, we're going to have to come up with a deficit reduction plan in the district. So there is no room for us to increase our expenditures. So what does that mean? That means that the state would force us to reduce our expenditures. So that's why I'm saying in our office, we always watch, how much we're putting into the budget process, how much cash that we're expending, because we have to watch the cash. Because even though we have that $27 million in the working cash, remember I said, we use that as an internal banking system for us, so we don't have to go out and get loans like we did 13, 14 years ago. In order to make payroll, we had to get a tax anticipation warrant. So the state forces us. If you look at what I pointed out, and I did that intentionally, and it's not due to anything that we're doing wrong in the district at all, nothing at all, because I want to reiterate that we've never had a healthy fund balance like we have now.
Absolutely.
You go back years ago, we were scrambling, right? We're not doing that anymore. But yet and still, the revenue over the expenditures in the current year is still negative. That was because when we had a very little revenue coming in, and this was greater than 5 years ago, we intentionally said we were not going to RIF. We were going to retain the staff.
Right.
And so we knew that we were going to negative spend in the current year, but we were going to be able to cover it with the ending fund balance. So retaining that same staff, right, that same staff, and then with inflation, we know that we're going to negative spend. But we have, a fund balance that we're watching, and we're making that recommendation to the superintendent and to the board, so that we're not forced to do a deficit reduction
Right.
plan. We're doing it on our own.
Right.
So that's what I wanted to point out.
Now, the other question in reference to our contracted, partners that I'm sure you did, okay, documents that details and describes all of our contracted partners. I'm very interested in that amount that, and I'm not talking about our reoccurring contracts, like our food service, our transportation. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about contracts that have that are in addition to, the normal reoccurring expenditure for that. Okay, you understand what I'm asking for? Okay, I want to know agencies that we're contracting with and the amount. Okay, agencies that are supposed to be for students. Okay, for the students. All of that stuff. When we contract with BAM, when we contract with Agent Service, when we contract with WOW, when we contract with Ombudsman, when we contract with Ombudsman Plus, those type things. I'd like to see that.
Yeah. During the budget process, we identified 3 tabs. I don't know if you recall those who were on the committee. Mm-hmm. We have the action steps, right, and goals. We have the general operating expenses, then we have a tab for contracts. And so we asked all of those who are requesting budget requests that they would provide. I think we shared that with the Board of Education, that they would include on that tab all existing contracts or potential contracts. Of course, through the development of the budget, we may have additional contracts, so we may have to add to that list, but we tried to capture all of those as we presented the information to the Board of Education. So I believe that the board currently has that information, but we'll certainly review it and make sure that we provide it to the superintendent so that the board can get it.
Right, and I guess this is a superintendent question. I brought it up at the last meeting, and it was about those agencies that are doing social emotional work, that those agencies come up under the supervision of our social work department. And have you made any decision about that?
No, I heard your recommendation. Dr. Cesario will look to see where that exactly will land, and we will let the board know at our upcoming meeting.
Yeah, because they need to be monitored.
Okay.
Yeah,
They are being
what they're
monitored, but we
doing-
did hear your recommendation, Ms. Hanna.
Right, and I think they need to be kept centralized under the correct heading, and that's social work. Okay, and I understand someone said about they answer to the principal, but that just doesn't, like I said, it just doesn't make professional sense. That they answer to the principals and not under the social work aspects umbrella. It just doesn't make sense.
Any other questions?
I did have a question, but I guess I'm kind of listening. I mean, I was listening at the pros and cons of the idea of the denial of the principals in terms of, I guess, their input and ideas and whatever they think that they can use to achieve to make the students better in their building. I guess there must be a reason why denial is. What I'm hearing is that, finance has a lot to do with the idea that the reason we said no to whatever the requests may be. But I don't even, I guess from my concern, what those requests didn't have any substance to them or anything. I do want to, I understand the area superintendents and everybody and those individuals kind of set the stage as opposed to what goes on in the district, but at the same time, we always talk about they at the front line, and in the front line see everything going on in the day-to-day operations. So therefore, sometimes I believe myself, if I'm looking at something going on every day, and there's some issues going on, I should be able to have some kind of knowledge about it as opposed to what direction to move to make things better. But anyway,
well, one of the things I want to correct is that finance doesn't make that decision in isolation. We do it in a collaborative nature with operations, which we are a part, and also ASAP. But one of the things that I did mention just earlier is that we only have so much money, and we have to operate within the confines of those monies. We're spending far more because we have ESSER money. We're spending far more than we would spend otherwise. So yes, a lot of the money is going into what the principals have asked for. But there must still be a vetting process. And I mentioned that we've identified needs, and one of the things that we've mentioned to the board before, that even though something isn't funded doesn't mean that it's not a need, it just means that it's unfunded. Because we only have a limited amount of resources that we could pay for things.
And to Ms. Hannah's point, as opposed to, I think she brought up the issue about the budget for various agencies. That's in our district, and their purpose for our children. The question is, for me, once again, I guess Teresa says, it's going to come forward to us to show us the impact of the money that we're spending and whether it's being used for the right reason or it's just money that's being spent. And again, I'm waiting on that presentation where I'll be able to really be able to see what's really going on. I mean, a lot of times we can say one thing and do something different, and then you can put anything and make it look good.
Right.
So, and then I want to make sure that the money that's coming out, that the budget, the money that we're spending for all these different agencies that's coming in our district, we're supposed to be able to do some of the things that we expect them to do. We talk about social, emotional, helping our kids with the discipline, cut down on our suspension rate, all those different things, maybe to deter kids from beating each other up. I want to make sure that the money we spend is going to accommodate those things. And I guess it's coming forward for me to be able to see that. And I just want to say that I'm not the sharpest drawer in the north, but I know what I'm looking at when I see it.
I have three questions. The first one is, so we're remaining steady on our capital improvement plan projects. That we haven't increased anything, we haven't changed that. That we're just on keeping that the same program, right? That's
Yes, ma'am.
About the 10 million every year.
Yes, I see Mr. Booth shaking his head. Yes, but we spent the first year 13 million of that $30 million that was reserved. And then we spent 10 million, so we don't have 10 left. So the remainder of that 30 million is here.
But we're still,
Yes, ma'am.
And I just want to piggyback on your question about that. Our schedule of having these, having the life safety issues completed, are we on track? Because I know that there was A, a B, and a C, and are we on track as far as our deadline?
Good evening. So we are on track, Ms. Hannah. I believe the last question that came up was regarding our 8 priorities. We did send a report to that effect. I believe we were close to 95 to 96% complete on those items, and the B priorities are items that are interwoven with the capital improvement plan as well as the life safety work that the operations team is doing.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Sean.
and two things about fees that we charge. We charge for computers and we charge for enrollment fees. Are we, I know we don't collect a lot of that stuff, so are we going to do anything about forgiving that, waiving that?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am, it is a recommendation to the superintendent, and I think she has approved it, that we're waiving on those fees. That's why in the budget document, we don't have any revenue coming in from fees.
Is that also?
Except for
sports?
That's other stuff. But registration fees, waived, right?
Yes.
Except for athletic fees, right? Because there's a choice in educational, yes.
Well, I want to thank Ms. Polk and the finance team, as always, for a very thorough presentation. We appreciate the way in which you communicate the information and listen to the board. We understand that it's always difficult in a district that has many needs to prioritize those needs, and there are many differences of opinion. But I do want to recognize your efforts and the work, because I know it's a collaborative process, and as soon as we end, as soon as the board work ends, I know you all start right away preparing for the next year. And so we appreciate and thank you all. So with that, I would like a motion.
Quick question. It's about budget, but not really. So this is for the superintendent. The school improvement plans, what date are you anticipating for those to come to the board for approval?
I see Ms. Patty there. Dr. Cesario, do you have a date we're bringing, or Dr. No?
It's actually coming up.
Yeah.
We don't, as soon as we get something set in stone, we'll send it over.
Aren't those
They're already
mandated
done.
by legislation?
They're done already. I'm sorry, I can't hear you. That's what I thought.
What happens?
Let me look at the date. My understanding is the board has already approved those in April, but let us go back to board docs.
Yeah, those have to be.
Maybe a part of that. Are you talking about the next, not next, right?
No, for the upcoming school year, right? Don't you receive the SIPs for the upcoming school year?
That was already.
That was approved in April?
In April, I'll have to go back to the notes. Let me look and I'll come back to the board. Yeah, I'll come back to the board with that.
If you can send me the info again on that, if it was. All right, thank you. That was my last and final question on that, board president.
Thank you, Annette. Wait, Ms. McBride had a comment.
I
I just want to say you spoke, like Brandon, I think you do a good job in your area of expertise. And sometimes I may ask questions, and some of the questions that I may ask you, no pun reflected towards you, but I mean, you're talking about some of the things that I'm concerned about, so this way you'll know that some of those questions I ask had nothing to do with you. Thank you.
With that, I'd like a motion to adjourn. Motion by Ms. Gonzalez, second by Mr. McBride. All in favor, signify with aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Meeting adjourned.